Commander Park Jin-woo felt his stomach tighten as he stared at the massive planet filling his view screen. The once green world of Kalani now looked like a dying ember, covered in thick grey clouds of volcanic ash. Red lightning flickered through. The darkness and the planet's surface glowed with rivers of molten lava. "Another distress call coming in, sir," Lieutenant Kim So-young said from her station, her fingers dancing across the communication controls. "That makes it over 200 calls in the last hour. They're saying the ash is getting thicker," Park rubbed his tired eyes. His fleet of 24 ships had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach this remote farming colony. The Kalani were a peaceful people who grew food for half the galaxy. They had no military, no weapons, just farms and families. When their world's dormant volcanoes suddenly exploded to life, they had nowhere to run. "How many people are we looking at?" Park asked Dr. Lee Hee-jin, who was reviewing the medical data streaming from the planet. "At least 40,000 civilians on the main continent," she replied, shaking her head. "Maybe more. The Kalani have very sensitive lungs. This volcanic ash is like poison to them. Children are dying first." Park walked to the large window at the front of his bridge. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. Below them, the planet Kalani spun slowly, its normal blue and green colors hidden under a blanket of death. His ships were already launching rescue shuttles, small craft that could land on the surface and bring people back to safety. The Compassion's Light was the biggest ship in Earth's rescue corps. It could hold 5,000 refugees and had 3 full hospitals inside. Around it flew 11 other medical ships, 8 supply vessels loaded with food and medicine, and 4 small guard ships that were mainly there to help with crowd control and emergency repairs. "First shuttle is landing now," reported navigation. "Officer Jung Min-seok. Team leader says the air is so thick with ash they can barely see 10 meters ahead." Park nodded and activated his ship's communication system. "All rescue teams, this is Commander Park. Remember, the Kalani can't breathe this ash for more than a few hours. Priority goes to children and elderly. Move fast, but move smart. We're not losing anyone today. Down on the planet's surface, rescue." Team leader Sergeant Odeho stepped out of his shuttle, wearing a full environmental suit. The ground beneath his feet was covered in grey powder that rose in small clouds with each step. In the distance, he could see Kalani families huddled around their simple homes, many of them coughing violently. "Medical teams set up the emergency breathing stations," Deho ordered through his radio. "Engineering teams start marking safe landing zones for the big shuttles." Back on the ship, Dr. Lee Hee-jin was preparing the medical bays for incoming refugees. The Kalani were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes adapted for their world's gentle sunlight. Their lungs were designed for clean, pure air, not the toxic soup now surrounding their planet. "We're going to need to put most of them on breathing assistance," she told her medical staff. "Their lung tissue is already damaged from just a few hours of exposure. Some of the children might need full life support." Lieutenant Kim So-young suddenly straightened at her station. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors. Multiple contacts approaching our position." Park moved quickly to her station. "Show me." The tactical display lit up with green dots representing his rescue fleet. The orange, circle of planet Kalani, and now several red contacts moving toward them from deep space. "How many ships?" Park asked. "At least 12, sir. Maybe more. They're big ones, too, much larger than our escort ships." Sensor operator Choi Min-ho leaned over his instruments, his face growing pale. "Commander, these aren't merchant ships or other rescue fleets. I'm reading heavy armor, weapon systems, military-grade engines. This is a war fleet." Park felt ice in his veins. "What military force operates in this sector?" "According to the star charts, this area should be empty," Min-seok replied, checking his navigation computers. "The nearest military base is 6 systems away." "Sir, they're coming out of hyperspace now," Choi reported. Through the bridge windows, space itself seemed to tear open as 12 massive ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. They were dark and angular, built for war rather than peace. Red markings covered their hulls, and weapon ports glowed with charging energy. "Those are Vexthul ships," whispered Lieutenant Kim So-young. "I recognize the design from our military database. The Vexthul Dominion was known throughout the galaxy as aggressive and territorial. They controlled several star systems through fear and had a reputation for attacking first and asking questions later. But they had no business being here in neutral space near a humanitarian disaster. "Open a communication channel," Park ordered. "Full spectrum broadcast." So-Young worked her controls, then nodded. "Channel open, sir." Park stepped forward, speaking clearly into the ship's communication system. "This is Commander Park Jin-woo of the Earth Rescue Corps ship Compassion's Light. We are conducting humanitarian operations on planet Kalani under Galactic Emergency Protocol 7. This is a non-military relief mission. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The bridge fell silent as they waited for a response. On the tactical display, the Vexthul ships continued moving toward them, their weapons systems glowing brighter. "Try again," Park said. "Send our rescue authorization codes. Make sure they understand we're not military." So-Young sent the transmission, her hands shaking slightly. "No response, sir. They're not even acknowledging our signals." The Vexthul ships arranged themselves in perfect attack formation, surrounding the human rescue fleet like predators circling prey. Their weapon ports were now fully charged, and targeting systems locked onto every Earthship. "Commander," Choi said quietly, "they're preparing to fire." Park stared at the approaching warships, his mind racing. His rescue fleet had minimal defenses and was filled with medical supplies, not weapons. Below them, 40,000 Kalani civilians were dying from volcanic ash, depending on Earth's rescue teams to save them. And now, for reasons he couldn't understand, a Vexthul war fleet was preparing to attack clearly marked humanitarian vessels engaged in a mercy mission. "All ships prepare for emergency maneuvers," Park ordered, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. "Get our people off the surface now." The Vexthul ships moved closer, their weapons ready to fire. The universe seemed to hold its breath for one terrible moment. Then space erupted in deadly light as the Vexthul warships opened fire without any warning or communication. Commander Park Jin-woo watched in complete shock as bright plasma beams tore through the medical ship Healing Dawn. The vessel, painted, with large red crosses and rescue symbols visible from space, simply vanished in a ball of white-hot fire. In less than 3 seconds, 300 doctors, nurses, and Kalani refugees who had just been rescued were gone forever. "No, no, no!" Park screamed, his hands gripping the bridge railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "All ships, emergency, evasive maneuvers, get out of their firing range." His communication officer, Lieutenant Kim So-Young, was frantically working her controls, sending desperate messages on every frequency. "This is Earth Rescue Fleet 7. We are non-combatant vessels, conducting humanitarian operations. We have wounded civilians aboard. Please cease fire." But the Vexthul ships didn't even respond. They moved through space like deadly sharks, their weapon systems picking targets with cold precision. The supply ship Providence, commanded by Captain Yoon Dae-hyun, tried to turn away from the attacking fleet. Yoon had been Park's friend for 15 years, a gentleman who had joined the rescue corps to help people, not fight wars. Park watched helplessly as 6 plasma beams hit the Providence from different angles. The ship's hull cracked open, like an egg, spilling cargo containers full of medical supplies and food into the darkness of space. Captain Yoon's final transmission was cut off mid-sentence as his ship broke apart. "They're targeting the medical ships first," reported sensor operator Choi Min-ho, his voice shaking with disbelief. "They're deliberately attacking the vessels, with the most refugees aboard." The 4 small escort ships that traveled with the rescue fleet were never meant for real combat. They carried light weapons mainly used for clearing space debris or dealing with pirates. Against a full Vexthul battle fleet, they were like children fighting grown men. Captain Lee Youngmin of the escort ship Guardian tried to position his vessel between the enemy and the remaining medical ships. His small craft fired everything it had, but the plasma bolts just bounced off the Vexthul armor without causing any damage. The return fire cut through the Guardian like it was made of paper. Deep inside the Compassion's Light, Dr. Lee Hyejin felt the ship shake as enemy weapons hit their hull. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the medical bays, where dozens of Kalani refugees lay on hospital beds. their lungs still damaged from the volcanic ash. Many were children, their large eyes wide with terror as they heard the explosions. Emergency. Evacuation, Dr. Lee shouted to her medical staff. Get the refugees to the escape pods, carry the ones who can't walk. Nurse Kim Ji-hyun lifted a small Kalani child in her arms, the alien's blue skin pale with fear and sickness. Doctor, the escape pods weren't designed for Kalani physiology. Their lungs can't handle the recycled air systems. Then we modify them. As we go, Dr. Lee replied, helping an elderly Kalani man toward the evacuation corridor. We're not leaving anyone behind. But even as they worked to save lives, more explosions rocked the ship. The Vexthul weren't just attacking the ships. In space, they had sent landing craft down to the planet's surface. On Kalani, Security Chief Sergeant Kim Tae-hyung was coordinating the evacuation of the surface rescue teams. His small security force was armed only with basic weapons meant for crowd control and emergency situations. Through his tactical display, he watched in growing horror as Vexthul dropships landed near the temporary medical camps his people had set up. All surface teams, immediate evacuation, Tae-hyung ordered through his radio. Enemy ground forces are deploying, but it was too late for many of the rescue workers. The Vexthul soldiers who emerged from their landing craft weren't taking prisoners. They moved through the medical camps with military precision, their weapons firing at anything that moved. Tae-hyung watched his tactical screen in disbelief as the enemy soldiers approached a field hospital where Dr. Park Sun-woo and his team were treating Kalani children. The doctor stepped out of the medical tent with his hands raised, shouting that they were non-combatants treating wounded civilians. The Vexthul soldier shot him without hesitation. They're executing medical personnel, Tae-hyung reported to Commander Park, his voice hollow with shock. Sir, they're not just attacking our ships, they're killing wounded Kalani civilians who can't even stand up. Through his binoculars, Tae-hyung could see Vexthul soldiers moving through the refugee camps, systematically shooting anyone too injured or weak to run away. Children, elderly civilians, anyone who couldn't flee fast enough, was murdered where they lay back in space. The Compassion's light was dying. Half the ship's systems had failed, life support was critical, and hull breaches were venting atmosphere into space. Commander Park stood on his bridge as his crew worked desperately to keep the ship functional long enough for the evacuation to continue. Sir, we've lost main engines, reported Engineer Officer Nam Ji-wan. We're running on emergency power only. Around them, escape pods were launching from the ship, each one carrying as many refugees and crew members as possible. But the Vexthul ships were targeting even these small escape craft, destroying pods full of wounded civilians as they tried to flee. Park activated the ship's emergency recording system, knowing that this might be the last chance to tell Earth what had happened here. His hands shook as he spoke into the recorder. This is Commander Park Jin-woo of Earth Rescue Fleet 7 emergency log entry. We responded to a humanitarian crisis on Kalani Colony World. 40,000 civilians were dying from volcanic ash poisoning. We deployed medical teams and began evacuation operations under Galactic Emergency Protocol 7. The ship shook again. As more weapon fire hit the hull. Through the bridge windows, Park could see the burning wreckage of his fleet scattered across space. The Vexthul Dominion attacked our clearly marked rescue vessels without warning or provocation. They are systematically murdering medical personnel and wounded civilians. This is not warfare. This is genocide. Sparks flew from damaged control panels as the ship's systems continued to fail. Lieutenant Kim So-young was coordinating the final evacuation. Tears streaming down her face as she watched more escape pods destroyed by enemy fire. Earth must know what happened here, Park continued into the recorder. The Vexthul have shown their true nature. They don't just attack military targets. They murder those who try to help the innocent. They kill children and doctors and anyone too weak to fight back. The recording system flickered and died as the ship's power finally failed. Park looked around his bridge one last time, then headed toward the final escape pod. Of his 24-ship rescue fleet, only 4 vessels had managed to escape the massacre. Behind them, Kalani burned while Vexthul forces celebrated their glorious victory over unarmed medical personnel and refugee civilians. The message would reach Earth in 3 days. And when it did, humanity would learn what had been done to their people who had only wanted to save lives. The massive assembly hall on Earth had never been so quiet. 5,000 representatives from every human nation, colony, and corporation sat in complete silence, their faces pale as they watched the horrific footage playing on the giant screens around them. Admiral Song Kyung-hwan stood at the center podium, his weathered face like carved stone, as the images showed Vexthal soldiers systematically executing wounded Kalani refugees. The camera footage, recovered from the escape pods, showed everything in terrible detail. Doctors shot while treating, children, nurses murdered while carrying injured civilians to safety, families torn apart by plasma fire as they tried to flee the medical camps. "Turn it off," whispered Representative Kim In-soo from the Korean Confederation, his hand covering his mouth in horror. But Admiral Song shook his head. "No. Everyone needs to see this. Every person in this room needs to understand exactly what the Vexthal Dominion did to our people." The footage continued. Commander Park Jin-woo's final message played through the speakers, his voice breaking as he described watching his medical ships destroyed one by one. The camera showed escape pods, full of wounded civilians being targeted and destroyed by Vexthal fighters. Children screaming as their rescue shuttles exploded around them. "These were our doctors," Admiral Song said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Our nurses, our engineers, our pilots, people who volunteered to risk their lives to save strangers on a dying world, people who believed that helping others was more important than their own safety." Secretary General Han Mirai sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched Dr. Lee Hyejin's final moments. The footage showed the chief medical officer staying behind to make sure the last Kalani refugees reached the escape pods, even as the ship exploded around her. "The Vexthal didn't attack a military fleet," Admiral Song continued. "They didn't target strategic installations or threaten our colonies. They murdered humanitarian workers. They executed wounded refugees. They showed the galaxy exactly what they think of mercy, of compassion, of every value that makes us human." The footage finally ended, leaving the assembly hall in absolute darkness for a moment before the lights slowly came back on. Admiral Song looked out at the thousands of faces staring back at him, all of them showing the same mixture of grief, rage, and determination. "The Vexthal Dominion has declared war on humanity," he stated simply. "Not through any formal declaration, but through their actions. They have shown us that they see kindness as weakness, that they believe mercy deserves death." Secretary General Han Mirai stood up slowly, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Admiral Song, you have full authorization to mobilize every military asset humanity possesses. No restrictions, no budget limitations, no political oversight. Do whatever needs to be done." The vote was unanimous. 5,000 representatives, speaking for 12 billion humans across dozens of worlds, all agreed on one thing. The Vexthal had made the worst mistake in their species' history. Within minutes of the vote, transformation began across human space. CEO Park Sun-hee of Titan Shipworks left the assembly hall and immediately called her factory managers on Europa and Ganymede. "Shut down all civilian production," she ordered, her voice hard as steel. "I want every medical fabrication line converted to weapons manufacturing within 6 hours. Every orbital station that's been building hospital ships for the past decade is now building destroyers." Her chief engineer protested over the communication link. "Ma'am, that will take months to properly convert the assembly lines. Then you have 6 hours to figure out how to do it improperly," Park Sun-hee replied. "The Vexthal murdered our medical personnel. Our response is going to be measured in warships, not months." Across the solar system, other changes were happening just as quickly. Colonel Im Jae-hwan, commander of the Mars Defense Grid, watched, his tactical displays light up with installations that hadn't been active for decades. "Sir, we're getting activation signals from Defense Platform 7, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Bang Min-jae. "I thought that station was decommissioned years ago." Colonel Im smiled grimly. "A lot of things were supposedly decommissioned, Lieutenant. The asteroid belt mining stations, the Jupiter orbital weapons platforms, the deep space monitoring arrays. Turns out they were just sleeping. Hidden throughout human space, military installations that the galaxy had never seen began coming online. weapon manufacturing facilities disguised as civilian factories, shipyards hidden inside asteroid mining operations, defense platforms that had been listed as decommissioned in public records but had actually been maintained in secret for decades. Major Yoji-1 ran the Deep Space Reconnaissance Division from a facility buried deep under the moon's surface. Her job was to monitor alien military movements and keep Earth informed of potential threats. Right now, her screens showed Vexthul fleet positions across 17 different star systems. "Admiral, we're intercepting Vexthul military communications," she reported to Admiral Song over encrypted channels. "They're celebrating their attack on our rescue fleet. Their commanders are calling it a great victory and claiming that humanity has been taught to fear them." Admiral Song's laugh was cold and bitter. "They think they've intimidated us. They actually believe that murdering medical personnel will make us afraid to help others." Major Yu pulled up more intelligence reports. "Sir, their military analysts are predicting that humanity will withdraw from humanitarian operations galaxy-wide. They expect us to recall all our rescue fleets and stop offering aid to other species." "Then they understand nothing about human nature," Admiral Song replied. "When someone attacks our soldiers, we fight back. When someone attacks our colonies, we defend them. But when someone murders our doctors and nurses while they're trying to save children, when they execute wounded refugees who can't even stand up," he paused, looking out at the growing fleet assembling in Earth's orbit. Hundreds of ships that had been civilian vessels just hours ago were now being fitted with weapons and armor. Thousands more were under construction in facilities that hadn't existed on any official records. That's when they learn why most species in the galaxy prefer to stay on humanity's good side. Admiral Song finished. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. Manufacturing corporations were converting their entire production capacity to military use. Mining companies were revealing that their asteroid processing facilities were actually shipyards capable of building battle cruisers. Research stations throughout the outer colonies were admitting that their scientific experiments had actually been weapons development programs. Within 72 hours, Earth's military production had tripled. Hidden shipyards throughout human space revealed themselves, adding their strength to the growing armada. The galaxy had seen humanity's rescue fleets, their exploration vessels, their merchant ships carrying trade goods between the stars. They had never seen what humanity looked like when their healers were murdered and their compassion was answered. With Genocide. CEO Lee Kyung-ho of the Centauri Manufacturing Consortium watched the production reports coming in from facilities across 3 star systems. "How long until the first wave of new warships is ready for deployment?" he asked his production chief. 18 days for the destroyers, sir. 4 weeks for the heavy cruisers. 2 months for the dreadnoughts." Lee nodded grimly. The Vexthul wanted to see what happens when humanity is truly threatened. They wanted to know what we do when our mercy is met with murder. He looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there the Vexthul were still celebrating their victory over unarmed medical personnel. They're about to find out. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as 12 separate human battle fleets emerged from hyperspace at exactly the same moment. Across the Vexthul Dominion, from their capital world to their most distant military outposts, humanity's response had arrived with terrifying precision. Admiral Song Kyung-hwan had named it Operation Reckoning, and every detail had been planned, with the cold efficiency that only deep grief and burning anger could produce. For 6 weeks, human intelligence agents had mapped every Vexthul military installation, every supply route, every communication relay. Now that knowledge would be put to devastating use. Captain Jung Johan stood on the bridge of the battleship, Retribution as his fleet approached Vexthul Prime, the enemy's homeworld. The planet was surrounded by massive orbital defense platforms that had protected the system for over 300 years. Local legends claimed these stations were indestructible, capable of destroying entire invasion fleets single-handedly. Enemy. "Defense grid is powering up," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Cho Sung-hwan. "They're targeting our lead ships." Captain Jung nodded calmly. "All ships, commence bombardment. Target the orbital stations first. I want them gone in 15 minutes. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that the Vexthul had never seen before. Particle beam cannons that could slice through armor like paper, plasma torpedoes that exploded with the force of small stars, kinetic projectiles moving at near light speed that hit with devastating impact. The first orbital defense platform, a massive structure the size of a small city, lasted exactly 4 minutes under concentrated human fire. Its shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, were overwhelmed in seconds. The station broke apart in a chain of explosions that lit up the darkness of space like a dying sun. "Station 2 is down," Cho reported. "Station 3 is evacuating. Station 4 is trying to retreat to higher orbit." "No retreat," Jung replied coldly. "They showed no mercy to our medical personnel. We show them the same consideration they showed our doctors." One by one, the legendary orbital defenses of Vexthul Prime were reduced to glowing debris. Stations that had stood guard for centuries became expanding clouds of metal and fire. The entire impregnable defense grid was destroyed in 14 minutes, less time than it took for most of the station crews to reach their escape pods. "Sir, enemy fleet is approaching from the outer system," Cho reported. 12 battleships, 36 cruisers." Captain Jung smiled grimly. "Signal the fleet, target their shipyards next. Make sure they can't build any more ships to replace the ones we're about to destroy." Halfway across the galaxy, Commander Bai Suyun was leading the assault on Kethvar, the industrial heart of the Vexthul military machine. This world contained the weapons factories that had supplied the fleets terrorizing peaceful species for decades. Now those same factories would burn. "Stealth reconnaissance confirms the intelligence reports," Lieutenant Park Ji-un told her commander as they studied the tactical displays. "Massive underground weapons manufacturing complexes, exactly where our agents said they would be. They've been hiding most of their military production beneath the planet's surface." Commander Bay studied the detailed maps that human intelligence had somehow obtained. Every factory, every storage facility, every transportation hub was marked, with perfect accuracy. "How did we get information this detailed?" she wondered aloud. "Lieutenant Colonel Shin's Cyber Warfare Division has been very busy," Park replied with a slight smile. "Apparently they've been reading Vexthul military communications for months. The human ships moved into position above Kethvar's major industrial centers, but instead of the massive bombardment that had destroyed the orbital stations at Vexthul Prime, these strikes were surgical and precise. Precision targeting only," Commander Bay ordered her weapons officers. "Military installations, weapons, factories, ammunition depots, but I want 0 civilian casualties. We're not like them. We don't murder innocent people." High-energy lasers struck with pinpoint accuracy, destroying factory complexes while leaving nearby residential areas completely untouched. Underground weapons facilities that had been hidden for decades were eliminated one by one, their locations revealed by intelligence that the Vexthul couldn't understand how humans had obtained. In the Vexthul Military Command Center on their capital world, General Krikstal was experiencing the worst day of his long career. Communication systems were reporting disasters from every corner of the Dominion simultaneously. Fleets were being destroyed, bases were under attack, and supply lines were being cut with coordination that seemed impossible. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence chief, Colonel Vexmar. "How do the humans know exactly where all our facilities are located? How are they hitting 12 different systems at exactly the same time?" Colonel Vexmar stared at his tactical displays in confusion. "Sir, they seem to know our fleet positions. Before we do. Supply Convoy 7 was destroyed 3 minutes after it left port. The humans were waiting for them. Our communications are encrypted with military-grade security," General Krikstal protested. "It's impossible for them to be reading our transmissions." What the Vexthul never discovered was that Lieutenant Colonel Shin Younger's cyber warfare division had been infiltrating their computer networks for over 2 years. Every military communication, every fleet movement order, every strategic plan had been copied and analyzed by human intelligence agents working in secret facilities throughout human space. "Sir, we're losing contact with Forward Base 12, reported another communications officer. Last transmission indicated human ships emerging from hyperspace directly above their position. That's the fourth base we've lost in the last hour, Crystal muttered. How did they know those locations? Those bases aren't on any public star charts. The systematic destruction continued with mechanical precision. Human fleets appeared at Vexthul military installations across 17 star systems, each attack timed perfectly to prevent any coordinated defense. Supply convoys were intercepted before they could deliver their cargo. Reinforcement fleets were destroyed while still in formation. Command posts were eliminated so quickly that many never had time to send distress signals. Major Kim Hansol commanded the human fleet attacking the Vexthul military academy on Zeth Kora, where enemy officers had been trained for over a century. "Sir, the academy is requesting permission to surrender," his communications officer reported. "Are there civilians inside?" Kim asked. "Negative, sir. Just military personnel and cadets." Kim paused for a moment, remembering the footage of Vexthul. Soldiers executing wounded Kalani refugees. "Accept their surrender. Take them prisoner, but treat them properly. We follow the rules of war, even when fighting people who don't." This pattern repeated across the Dominion. Human commanders showed mercy to surrendering enemies, treated prisoners with dignity, and carefully avoided civilian casualties. They fought with the cold efficiency of professional soldiers, but they maintained their humanity even in the face of enemies who had shown none. By the third day of Operation Reckoning, the Vexthul military command structure was in complete collapse. Entire fleets had surrendered rather than face destruction. Weapons factories lay in ruins. Supply networks had been completely dismantled. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 6 different systems," reported Major UG-1, from her intelligence center on Luna. "The Vexthul are requesting terms for ending hostilities." Admiral Song studied the reports coming in from across the combat zone. In 6 days, human forces had eliminated over 90% of Vexthul military capability. The Dominion that had terrorized 3 sectors of the galaxy for generations was now a broken collection of worlds, their capacity for aggression permanently crippled. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender," Admiral Song replied. "But the terms are non-negotiable. Complete disarmament, war crimes tribunals for those responsible for the Kalani massacre, and reparations for the families of our murdered medical personnel." The message was transmitted across all Vexthul communication channels. Within hours, the formal surrender documents were signed. The war was over, but the galaxy would never forget what happened when someone made the mistake of attacking humanity's healers. The Vexthul had wanted to see what humanity looked like when truly threatened. They had received their answer in the most decisive way possible. The massive Galactic Council chamber had hosted thousands of diplomatic meetings over the centuries, but never one quite like this. Representatives from 47 different species filled the curved seating areas, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes under the chamber's soft lighting. But today, all eyes were focused on the single human figure walking slowly toward the central podium. Admiral Song Kyung-hwan moved with quiet confidence, his simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the elaborately decorated robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other species' representatives. Behind him, holographic displays showed the devastating results of Operation Reckoning in stark detail. Destroyed Vexthul fleets, ruined military bases, and surrender documents signed by a once mighty empire that no longer existed. "Honored delegates," Admiral Song began, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. 6 weeks ago, the Vexthul Dominion committed what can only be described as an act of genocide against civilian populations and humanitarian workers. The chamber remained completely silent as Song activated his own holographic display. The images showed the Kalani rescue mission, the clearly marked medical ships, and the systematic slaughter that followed. These were not military vessels engaged in combat operations, Song continued. These were doctors, nurses, engineers, and pilots whose only weapons were medical supplies and emergency equipment. They died trying to save 40,000 Kalani civilians from volcanic poisoning. Ambassador Lixtar of the Centaurian hegemony shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His species had maintained friendly relations with both humanity and the Vexthul, and the complete destruction of Vexthul military power in just 6 days had shocked the entire galactic community. "Admiral Song," Lixtar said carefully, While we certainly understand humanity's anger over this tragic incident, many of us feel that the scale of your retaliation was perhaps excessive. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral. Song turned his attention to the Centaurian diplomat, and several nearby representatives noticed that the human's expression had grown noticeably colder. Excessive? Song repeated slowly. Ambassador, in 6 days of warfare, human forces eliminated 90% of Vex-Thul military capability. We accepted the surrender of over 50,000 enemy personnel. We treated prisoners according to galactic law. We provided medical care to wounded Vex-Thul soldiers. We carefully avoided civilian casualties, even when military targets were located in populated areas. Song paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Compare this to what the Vex-Thul did at Kalani. They executed wounded refugees who couldn't even stand up. They murdered medical personnel who were treating children. They destroyed escape pods full of civilians trying to flee a natural disaster. Tell me, Ambassador, which response was truly excessive? Council Speaker Prime Velthane, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council centuries ago, spoke in her carefully modulated voice. Admiral, I think what concerns many of us is not the morality of your actions, but the demonstration of military capability we witnessed. Few of us realized that humanity possessed such extensive defensive preparations. Admiral Song nodded slowly. That was entirely intentional, Speaker Prime. For the past 50 years, humanity has deliberately shown the galaxy only our peaceful side. You've seen our rescue fleets responding to disasters across dozens of worlds. You've seen our exploration, ships making first contact with new species. You've seen our merchant vessels carrying trade goods and cultural exchanges throughout galactic space. The holographic displays behind Song changed, showing images of humanitarian missions over the decades. Medical ships treating plague outbreaks, rescue fleets evacuating populations from natural disasters, exploration vessels sharing scientific discoveries with newly contacted civilizations. We hoped that you would judge us by our desire to help. Others not by our capacity to wage war, Song continued. We believed in peaceful coexistence. We thought that showing mercy and compassion would earn us the same treatment in return. Defense Minister Kang Suan stepped forward to join Admiral Song at the podium. Her presence added weight to the moment, as she was known throughout the galaxy as one of humanity's most respected diplomatic figures. The Kalani colony has been completely rebuilt, Minister Kang announced to the assembled delegates. Our medical ships continue their humanitarian missions across 43 different systems. Our rescue fleets still respond to every distress call, regardless of which species sends it. Our commitment to helping others has not changed. She paused, making eye contact with representatives throughout the chamber. However, there is now a new protocol in effect. The holographic displays shifted again, showing an official document bearing the seals of every human government and colony. The text was simple, written in clear language that left no room for misinterpretation. Any attack on clearly marked humanitarian vessels will be considered an act of war against all humanity, Minister Kang read aloud. Any targeting of rescue operations, any aggression against non-combatant ships engaged in medical or relief missions will be met with immediate and overwhelming military response. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations as representatives discussed this new development with their advisors. Some species seemed relieved that humanity would continue its humanitarian work. Others appeared concerned about the implications of the new policy. Ambassador Thekvar of the Rigelian Trade Federation raised a tentacle. Minister Kang, how do we know which ships are protected under this new doctrine? The same way you always have, Kang replied. Humanitarian vessels bear the blue markings of the Rescue Corps and transmit their authorization codes on all standard frequencies. They carry medical supplies, not weapons. They respond to distress calls, not strategic objectives. But what happens if there's a misunderstanding? Asked Representative Cordian of the Spiral Alliance. What if shots are fired in confusion during a crisis situation? Admiral Song answered this question. The same thing that happened before Kalani. We investigate, we communicate, we work together to prevent future incidents. But deliberate, systematic attacks on medical personnel? Execution of wounded civilians? Targeting of escape pods full of refugees? His voice hardened. That will never be tolerated again. As the human delegation prepared to leave the chamber, Council Speaker Prime Velthane made one final observation. Admiral, it seems that the galaxy has learned something important about humanity today. We had mistaken your restraint for weakness. Admiral Song paused at the chamber's exit, turning back to face the assembled representatives one last time. Speaker, Prime humanity has always been strongest when protecting others. We build our greatest ships not to conquer worlds, but to save them. We train our finest people not to destroy life, but to preserve it. The Vexthal made the mistake of thinking this made us weak. He gestured toward the holographic displays still showing the aftermath of Operation Reckoning. They learned otherwise. 3 days later, Captain Nam Woo-jin stood on the bridge of his escort ship Vigilant Guardian, watching the newest rescue fleet prepare for departure. The medical ships bore the same bright blue markings as always, their hulls painted with symbols of peace and healing that were recognized throughout the galaxy. But now those same symbols carried a different meaning. Every species in known space understood that attacking these ships meant war with humanity. Not just conflict or disagreement, but the complete and systematic destruction of their military capability. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the Rigel sector, reported Communications Officer Park Hyamin. Asteroid collision has damaged a mining station. 1,700 workers need immediate evacuation. Captain Nam nodded. Signal the fleet. Set course for Rigel maximum speed. As the rescue ships jumped into hyperspace, carrying doctors and medical supplies toward another humanitarian crisis, the galaxy watched with a new understanding. Humanity's mercy remained unchanged, their commitment to helping others as strong as ever, but now everyone knew the price of threatening those who dedicated their lives to saving others. The lesson learned at Kalani would echo across the stars for generations to come. Sometimes the greatest act of mercy is ensuring that such cruelty can never happen again.